Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. All right, we'll call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Yes. Okay. Before we do that, I guess we should call the roll to establish a quorum. Jamie?
Mr. Bray?
Yes.
Ms. Lyons? Here. Mr. Marcus? Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mr. Carney?
Present.
Mr. Rosa? Mr. Chavon?
Here.
And Chair White.
I am here. Thank you so much. Quorum having been established, has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? Are there any amendments to the minutes from the October 17th meeting? If not, then I would entertain a motion to adopt.
I had two notes.
Okay.
The first is on the motion for the minutes last time. It says a 5-0, and I'm not sure if that's accurate. I had opposed it, so it should have been a 4-1, or if I was omitted, that's fine, but. And then Richard made a comment on page 6. We have this, Mr. Bray, so that should be revised.
Wait, I'm sorry, can you tell me where you're looking for that?
For page 6,
Right?
it's
Mr.
the
Bray
third from the
asked.
bottom. Mr. Bray read from the historic preservation guidelines.
That was Mr. Rosa?
Yep.
Okay. So with Mr. Bray's objection to the minutes being noted in the tally on page 2, under item number 2, and the minutes being amended to reflect the third paragraph up from the bottom being Mr. Rosa as opposed to Mr. Bray. Accepting those, Mr. Rosa, hi. Well, I'll hold off on the vote till Mr. Rosa is able to chime in as well.
He might
What was the
verify.
first, what was the first issue?
Mr. Bray is noting that he objected to the minutes. He did not vote to approve. He voted
Oh,
not
so
to
it
approve
was
the minutes, so it would be a 4-1, I
4-1.
guess.
Yep.
With Bray dissenting. With those two amendments to the minutes, is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Carney. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Jones. I'm sorry, I'll get it, I promise. Motion having been made with a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, then the minutes carry, and I will pass the signed version to you guys. Thank you. All right, let's move on. Public sign-in, swearing in, I don't think we need that. We have no items on our agenda today, so we can move past that. Communication to the city commission. I want to take a minute to note something. I don't know if it's been addressed by the board yet. Has the board discussed sending a communication to the city to recognize Mr. Parker for his years of service to this board, to the city of Fort Lauderdale by any chance?
No.
No? All right, so I think it would be appropriate, and if the committee or if the board is so inclined, that we send a communication to the city commission asking them to have a resolution or some sort of recognition for Mr. Parker for his years of service to the Historic Preservation Board, as well as to the city, Sailboat Bend Historic, or the Sailboat Bend Civic Association, and the city of Fort Lauderdale as a whole. Dave was actively engaged in city affairs for many, many years, and was really a wonderful addition. He's going to be very missed. So I don't know if that's something that the committee feels strongly about, but I think it would be a nice gesture for us to recommend that.
No, I believe the mayor and Dean Turtellis and Steve Glassman both showed up to his memorial at the fire station.
Nice.
So you're looking for something beyond that acknowledgement, that recognition?
Yeah, I mean, I think the
A plaque,
city.
a statement from the city to go to?
I just think the city commission passing a resolution, just recognizing him for his years of service. I don't think we need anything, a plaque or anything like that, for him, but I just think the city commission as a whole.
Trying to figure out what you're trying to ask them to do.
Yeah, I think the city commission, we would recommend to the city commission that a resolution be passed, recognizing and honoring him for his service.
And that resolution goes into the city archives
Correct,
forever.
yeah.
So that his family, his extended family forever can always refer to it, and he'll be remembered for his service to the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea. He was a really nice man.
So we're gonna move for that then?
Okay, so moved.
So moved by Mr. Chavon, wonderful idea, Tim,
Thank
really
you.
great idea. Is there a second to Tim's motion?
I'll second.
All right, seconded by, I'll
Barbara, it's yours.
Seconded by Ms. Lyons.
Thank you.
All right.
May I just have Jamie just repeat it, cause I just wanna make sure we get
I'm
it
gonna give the,
crystal clear.
I'm gonna try to see if I can do my best to recite Tim's motion.
Okay.
That a communication be sent to the city commission recommending they pass a resolution recognizing and honoring David Parker for his years of service to the city of Fort Lauderdale, the Sailboat Bend Civic Association, and the city of Fort Lauderdale's Historic Preservation Board, and all other information that they deem necessary and appropriate. Is that what you said?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
God, great minds think alike. So the motion having been made, thank you, and seconded, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of sending that communication to the city, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so that communication will be sent to the city. Thank you for that. That'll bring us to the first substantive item on our agenda under section 6, 2023 HPB meeting schedule discussion, a true substantive matter. Consideration of some alternate dates for January and July. We all got the dates. Everybody had a chance to review those? Any comments or thoughts on the dates, including the alternates? I'll tell you that I will not be in the country on January 3rd. No, that's not true. I will not be in the state on January 3rd. So I would prefer the January 23rd date, but I don't know if anybody else feels strongly about either
I'll
of
be out
those.
of the country in the 23rd.
You'll be out of the country on the 23rd? Oh, shoot. How's everybody else on those dates? Let's see if we, what I don't wanna do is pick a date that we know we're not gonna have a forum. You know.
What happens on the 23rd? Did we come right back in the first Monday of February?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
That
2 weeks
that
later.
kinda,
that's quick. That's true.
it's just so fast.
Alright, so I'll just miss another meeting. So should we do January 3rd then? Do we wanna do January 3rd though?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is it a rule that there are 12 meetings per calendar year?
I think the code states we have to have a meeting every month.
I think so, I'll double check, but I know it says the first Monday of each month, I think, but I'll check.
It's something like that. Because of your thought we cancel January.
Well, one or the other, when they are, to your point, if you don't have enough time in between.
I mean, I think, we'll go ahead.
Maybe would there be another way to propose, let's say, the second week of January rather than basically the fourth week of the month?
Why is there such
Yeah.
a long gap between the 3rd and the 23rd?
Yeah, it's based on the availability of rooms, because we need either the 8th floor, this one, or the first floor chambers. So these were the options.
So we only have two choices, period.
Yeah.
That being said, I'm open to either, so whoever's got the
Yeah, 'cause I
wiggle
think
room
if
with
you
the 3rd
miss-
and the last week, it's up to you guys.
If you miss the January meeting, sure, there's only 2 weeks in between, but then it gets to be like your 6 weeks of material that you need to cover. It makes a much longer meeting. So whether that's appropriate to make some people waiting for an application to come before the board to be approved, it's, an issue for some people.
Fair point, we'll take it.
January 3rd.
January 3rd?
Third.
January 3rd.
Either day.
Don't care. 3rd, January 3rd. Alright, so we'll select January 3rd by straw poll. Let's talk about July. I don't see any reason not to do it on the 6th, unless people are traveling. 6th? Any objection to that?
Oh,
I wanna make sure that you're not
I'm,
gonna be like
I'm
fishing
into,
that day.
I'm into a new year here.
Yeah, I know, I just wanna make sure you're not, alright, we'll do the 6th then, we'll say the 6th.
Okay, thank you.
Alright, so the calendar being in front of you, utilizing the January 3rd and July 6th dates. Any other suggestions, comments, changes to that schedule? I'll entertain a motion to adopt those meeting dates for 2023.
So moved.
Thank you, moved by Mr. Carney, seconded by
I'll say.
Ms. Lyons. Thank you so much, once again. All those in favor of the schedule as discussed, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, there is our meeting schedule, thank you. Alright, that's gonna bring us to our next, again, substantive, the real substance of this meeting. Presentation on the strategic historic preservation plan. We have staff here to present, and I should have brought my regular glasses, not my sunglasses. But I swear I'm looking, it's just a prescription, I swear. So we'll turn it over to Trish.
I thought I'd stand up and do it so I wasn't in the way, sitting in front of you, but the Strategic Historic Preservation Plan is something that we've been discussing for really the past year or so. It's something that we had applied for grant funding about 2 years ago, and were awarded that funding last summer. And as part of the grant funding, we did hire a consultant to help. It's hard to take Jason seriously.
Sorry.
To help us
Too cool.
with public outreach and to put the plan together, and just with their knowledge and expertise, be able to formulate everything. But this was an objective that was listed first as part of the city's comprehensive plan, and that's something that we updated and put together probably about 3 or 4 years ago. So it was something we definitely wanted to do to give us a roadmap for the future for historic preservation, because we didn't necessarily have a list of items that we were going after to achieve, but just here and there. So this gives us a lot more structure to move forward as we go. We did do a lot of outreach as part of this process. The first thing that we did is an online community value survey in February, and we did get 262 responses from the survey. So it was a pretty good response, and that was advertised throughout the city through signage, on social media. We emailed our stakeholders. Yes.
How many surveys were sent out?
Well, it was a digital survey, so it was posted on our platforms, our social media platforms, so people could click on the link.
Mhm.
We also had paper kind of like posters advertising the fact that the survey was available around the city. So we had it at City Hall, at the Historical Society, at our offices, at DSD, and it did say, if you did want a paper survey, certainly request it. We'd be happy to provide that for you. I think only one person actually requested a paper survey, so we didn't have, most people did take it online. And so we collected that information. We did some follow-up interviews, one-on-one interviews. We had 2 in-person workshops. We had another virtual workshop. Some of you were in attendance at various things that we did. We did share a draft of the goals and objectives with the board probably in April, and got some feedback from all of you as far as the priorities were concerned. And then ultimately a draft was created from all of that feedback that we received over probably a 4-month span. You can see on this slide, on the initial survey that we conducted, the list of the priorities that came out of it. These are the 4 goals that are ultimately part of the plan. So we have the architectural resources surveys that were first, so just doing research in the community about what is significant with our architecture, education to the community, policies, and then resilience. And then after our second survey, it kind of got switched around. So ultimately, the priorities, the goals are listed in the order on the second survey results list. The plan that you received a copy of, it's on our website as well, is broken into 6 chapters. So there's, an overview of what the intent of it is, the background, the historic preservation history of Fort Lauderdale and the state of Florida. Some opportunities are outlined in chapter 5, and then chapter 6 is the actual strategic plan. And that outlines the 4 goals, 11 different objectives, and then we have 39 action items. And so you can kind of see here on this slide the different goals outlined. It's a little small with the text, but each goal has certain objectives that are related to them. So with resilience, we have 3 objectives, and then it kind of goes down the list. And we'll get in a little bit more detail in a minute. But we do have 39 action items, and they're broken up into different categories as far as what we're working on all the time, ongoing, what we're working in the near term, meaning we are going after it right now. We've started the project, or we plan to start the project within the next couple of years, and then midterm and long term. So we'll break it up as far as how many action items are of each category within each of these goals. So you can see there's a lot of near-term things, so we'll be busy getting some projects started. And some of those projects might actually take a long time. So it's not something that is going to be necessarily finished in 1 to 4 years, but we're starting it. So going into the resilience section, there is the 3 objectives: investigate strategies, increase knowledge, and analyze risk. And this is something that we really want to focus on as a city because we do have some vulnerabilities as far as hurricanes, what we were just talking about. So an example of one of the ongoing action items is that we'll try to create a resource list for property owners of how other properties, either in the city or in the region, have addressed resilience, either through elevating their property, dry floodproofing, wet floodproofing, different strategies that might be applicable to a historic structure, and then create a toolkit that can be utilized by any property owner just to investigate what might work for their home, their business, their property. And then a near-term action is to apply for a grant, which we actually applied for already, and it's to do a vulnerability study of all the historic structures in the city of Fort Lauderdale. And we would take a look at everything that we had designated already and say, what is the most important that needs to be, needs action taken on it through resilience? Does it need to be elevated? Does it need to be flood-proof? Does it need something to make sure that we can ensure its long-term preservation? So that's something we've already applied for. We're waiting to hear back if we receive the funds. And if we receive the funds, we'll be able to move forward with that. But that is a step 1 in order to be able to apply for more grant funding in the future to take care of actual hands-on projects that would actually implement something.
Quick question you may or may not know the answer to. Is flooding the top concern of resiliency at this point?
Well, yeah, I mean,
No, I mean, as opposed to, hurricanes or whatever. I mean, it's just flooding.
well, flooding is more frequent than maybe
Right.
a hurricane, but flooding also is a result of a hurricane.
Understood.
So there's multiple ways that you could have flooding.
Sure.
And we have a lot of low-lying areas, a lot of areas that are close to water. So for sure.
Just agenda or flow here, do you prefer
Sure.
that we interject, have
Oh,
a
that's-
conversation
yeah,
for,
that's fine.
as you're going through it, or do you want us to wait until with the presentation before we kind of provide any comments or feedback?
Either's fine. If you have a question right now, we can talk about it right now. We're in a very intimate, small space, so.
Just because you brought up that one
Sure.
question that relates to it, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like the West Side Schoolhouse, it's been unoccupied, dilapidating since 2015. 7 years have gone by and nothing's changed on it. So is that something that some of these grants would go towards requesting assistance with that? Or how do we go about addressing that so it doesn't further deteriorate, so we lose that
Yeah.
national, representation, the registration altogether?
Yeah, and that property is privately owned, so it's not a city-owned property.
Yep.
Who owns it?
It's a nonprofit organization in Minneapolis, and they actually own the neighboring property, which is the Arts Loft. So I'm not, we don't know exactly what their plans are, or I don't know.
Because like code enforcement, those are all things that, we can do to try and move that along, but I'm just asking, like, getting
Sure.
grant money to help the owners to do some of those things, because there
Yeah.
are other programs within the city of Fort Lauderdale that does help communities lift them up to address some of these issues with the communities.
Yeah, I mean, I would say with the grant programs, it's a little bit more difficult when it's a private entity to apply for them. They can certainly use the information that we're developing through the planning grants to help them apply for the bricks and mortar
Making it
grants
available information.
and be support for them, but as not being the property owner, it becomes a little bit more challenging.
Because then it goes with the seawalls too, because as you pointed out, is it flooding, is it hurricanes, because all of the seawalls and the rising, because this week, we're gonna have significant rising with the storm that's coming through, and all the seawalls being lower are gonna be a problem along the H1 district and Sailboat Bend because of the seawalls.
Yeah, so, maybe through the vulnerability assessment, some of the city-owned properties would be identified for, that would be something that would be beneficial. And then we can apply for a grant in the future to actually get funding for that property to build or rehabilitate the seawall.
One of the things, those will come from state and federal government potential resources for grants or funding.
Well, but that's for the city, that's not necessarily for the private landowners. The
Yeah.
private landowners can apply for
Well,
separate types of issues. But
but both are issues.
But I think that the purpose here is that the grants that we're applying for, to identify what city resources and to hopefully get funding for city resources to be put forth for city properties, if I'm understanding correctly.
But all that area along H1 district, the Riverwalk, Esplanade Park is all city-owned property.
Yeah, there's several city-owned
Sure.
properties there. So assuming we get the grant funding to do the assessment, that will help us move forward in the future with a lot of things that we would want to prepare better for.
Trish, just to be really clear on money, the grant is dedicated to investigate city-owned historic properties,
So
not privately owned.
the grant that have already applied for is for all historic properties that are designated.
Whether it's privately owned or not,
Correct.
which would include the schoolhouse that Richard's,
Yeah, it's an
Referred to.
investigation to give an overall assessment.
okay, so that's the assessment part.
Uh-huh.
If there was a need for restoration, or if it was destroyed by flooding or hurt by flooding, would that money be qualified to that house as well?
So-
Or would the city's properties take priority?
You would have to apply for another grant to do that kind of work, and grants have all sorts of stipulations that,
So we're just gonna get an
This is,
assessment with
this is,
this grant?
if we get
Like
this
a
grant, it's
planning.
just to be, yeah, it's like to
Just
be able
to take a look around.
to take a look around, figure out what's going on, and then
So
figure out
this
what
is
other
what
grants
needs
we
to be
might be able
fixed?
This is maybe how
Then-
you do it.
then
There's
let's
a
go
way-
find
there-
the
These are
money.
the best ways to do it.
Okay.
It's- yeah.
There's further issues that go with that, with drainage and sewage and all
Right,
these areas
okay.
because of the flooding. If it's not drained properly, it's just gonna accumulate and go into all these private homes, and then again, you lose the historic property.
How much is the grant for?
I applied for 130,000, but, you know, it's not nothing's guaranteed.
Right.
Grant's not guaranteed.
Right, right.
So we have to wait and see,
Thank
if we
you for
receive it.
clarifying that, I
Sure.
was so confused,
Mhm.
thank you.
How many properties do you think we can squeeze out of 138 grand?
Well, the intent would be to do all of the individually designated properties, and there's about 65. And then we would also look at archaeological resources or archaeological areas in general, and sailboat bed, and the H1 district as well. But a lot of those properties are individually designated already.
So there's some crossover there.
Yeah, there's some crossover.
Great.
Okay, so goal 2 is architectural resource surveys. And we do have 2 near-term action items as part of this and 3 ongoing. So an example of the ongoing initiatives that we're doing is to continue to apply for grants that we've been receiving over the past several years to conduct architectural resource surveys. So we've talked about it before, where we've already conducted surveys of 10 neighborhoods throughout the city. They're posted on our website. We actually have a new map that Amanda helped create that is interactive, and it's a story map, so you can see visually how much we've already surveyed and how much, you know, which properties, where they're located, and, you know, what we said about them. Yes.
Did notice, and maybe it's just something I missed, but like Coley Hammock, Rio Vista, and like Dorsey Riverbend were not included in that initial survey of
So
properties that you were
Coley
doing?
Hammock has been surveyed.
Or Rio Vista.
Rio Vista is actually one we're starting right now. It's not on our website yet because we just received the grant.
Mhm.
And then it'll be Rio Vista and Riverside Park this year is what we're working on. And we have a consultant that we'll be engaging with soon and probably get started at the beginning of next year, 2023, just in a couple months. And then we also have, next year, we've already applied for a grant to do Dorsey River Bend and South Middle River. So the intent is to do citywide, and we're just strategically going around the city. We're looking at data of the properties that exist in these neighborhoods to identify which neighborhoods have the highest concentrations of older properties. Can't say historic because we don't know yet. So we go around and survey them, collect the data from those properties, and make a report that's available on our website ultimately. One of the near-term examples is something that came out of this board, and that's to apply for a grant to digitize and archive and display Sailboat Bend Historic District information. So that's something we talked about as a board The grant has been applied for, and it goes along with that Dorsey River Bend grant. It's in that same cycle. So they've already met, the state board already met to talk about the grant applications. They've ranked them, and we'll hear back probably close to July 1st of 2023 as to whether or not we receive those grants. So it's a long-term initiative, and then usually we don't start until like the fall of even the following year. So you're kind of planning a year and a half to 2 years in advance for these grants. And then moving on to goal 3, which is policies. One of the examples of a near-term activity is to amend the Sailboat Bend Historic District Ordinance. This is something we were starting to work on a couple of years ago when we updated the survey as a whole. And we always continuously discuss different elements of it, so.
We got some suggestions on that, right? Like, you know.
So it's something we'll probably bring back, within the next year.
Over and over again, right?
Yeah, and meet with the community to talk about it some
Right.
more.
Over and over again.
Yeah, well, where we left it was we did have a small working group that was part of the Sailboat Bend Civic Association membership, that we did talk about a lot of the details, and some things were updated as part of that conversation. Some things are more, this is historic preservation, this is best practices, this is something that really should be part of a historic district and be maintained and kept as part of the code language. But once we get there, we'll talk about it.
Just curious, I don't know if this was appropriate slot, but with the 2 incentives, I'm curious if anyone's ever applied for them, successfully been granted them, like the tax incentives or the transfer of rights. I know that's recent, but has anybody ever utilized those,
So
to
the
your knowledge?
Yeah, the 10-year tax abatement, we haven't had anyone apply for it in recent years. Where I used to work, we had several applicants, usually a year, that would take advantage of that, but a lot of times it just depends on the property owner if they want to go through the process, because it's a multi-step application process that has to be undertaken. So it's up to them if they want to go through that. It does require oversight by the Historic Preservation Office, more so than you'd normally get. And
I'm curious because
Yeah.
you kind of listed as an incentive. I've explored it personally, and because it was so onerous and kind of not really an incentive when it came down to it, it just kind of, I wonder if anybody has succeeded in doing that.
in the municipality I used to work in, yes, they did. It just depends on how much effort a property owner wants to go through, but that is authorized through a state statute. And it's not something that we can amend or alter to make it an easier process. It is the way that it is. In that scenario, we do have another tax incentive that's for commercial properties, and that just requires the property owner to fill out a 1-page application form with the county appraiser's office and provide the resolution of designation, and then it applies. And it's a 50% reduction on their base tax rate for the city and for the county. And it doesn't include like the school board and stuff like that, but just the base taxes.
It's not a lot of money. I don't wanna pop a hole in the conversation.
You're doing great, Trish. Let's keep going. All right, yeah.
Moving along.
In the scheme of things, it's something that we can all talk about it in the future, but I'm glad Richard brought it up that,
Well, because
if it was that attractive, you would think that regardless of the amount of paperwork, you'd go through it to get the money.
Sure.
Because it would be helpful.
Right,
But
but it's the point is that there really
it's-
are very limited incentives at this point, so that's where the focus should be, rather than disincentivizing people because it's such an onerous process.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. The TDRs, the transfer of development rights, is something that is new. We're kind of getting started with one applicant right now, but we have to take it through the process to see how that all sorts out. The 4th goal is for education, so that's somewhat self-explanatory. We have 5 ongoing initiatives and then 1 near-term initiative. One of the ongoing ones is to encourage the Fort Lauderdale Historical Society to provide educational materials to school groups. So they do that on their own, but we are going to take a more active role in providing historic preservation information to them that they can pass along.
Do they provide information to property owners?
They do, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
Can I clarify that for you and give you an
Well-
answer that's?
yeah, no, is that right? You're gonna clarify? I mean, it would be interesting also if we tried to push them to provide either upon the transfer of the property or to somebody, or maybe first shot, whatever, to get information to property owners or to owners of properties that are historically designated or are in a historic district.
Yeah.
So that they, know it's out there, and if somebody buys a property, then automatically they get something like I don't know if there's a way to do that, if they'd be inclined. We could help them apply for a grant for that, but,
yeah.
I don't mean literally, but,
Yeah, I don't think they're giving out like a handout necessarily for
Yeah.
people, but we can certainly talk about it. We did make that update, some of you may remember, to the property appraiser's website,
Yeah.
where it does give my contact information. If you, are looking at a historic property, immediately it pops up and says, contact Tricia, you're in a historic area.
That's great.
So that's been helpful. I think, when a property's listed, I know it because my phone and email is like crazy, but especially if it's like a hot property, people really want to know about it and know about the process.
And
So-
that doesn't take up any of your time, I'm sure.
No.
Right, so maybe we should have a specifically designated email for that instead.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we can talk about. Obviously, we're making some changes internally, like we were able to hire DeAndrea, so that's been an amazing help. And it frees up a little bit of like bandwidth to think about how can we make improvements otherwise, so it's been all good stuff.
Well, the educational stuff, you think it's self-explanatory, but there's
Yeah.
a couple of different things that I'd like to address, and
Mhm.
a couple of them are like the Riverwalk area and the walking tours type of stuff.
Mhm.
I know that they've started something, they've had things, but I don't know, again, how many people use that, or if it needs to be automated, so that there's, like you can get it on your iPhone and you just kind of, as you're driving by or walking by things, you can kind of click on it with the segues or whatever. Not just the H1 district, but
Right.
again, exploring that or expanding that into the Seattle Bend or Stranahan House. So the whole district from Stranahan, H1, Seattle Bend, the three historic districts in the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
If there's a possibility to develop a plan for that so that you actually have an education about what the city has
Mhm.
and what it is and why it is that way.
Yeah, and some of these things like that in particular, it might be, this is a great project that we need assistance with,
Yeah.
so we need to apply for a grant, but we see it on our list and we can make progress towards it.
And the second one that comes to education is, I see often that education typically has been to inform the public of things or the people you assume are uninformed, but there has been more of a trend lately for the CEO of executives of companies to learn from new hires. And in this case, I'm gonna equate it to the community. So is there an effort to educate the city or government or decision makers about what the residents or the people of Fort Lauderdale want or need when it comes to historic preservation?
Well, I would say, partly
This
this
does
fulfills
it,
it,
yeah.
this plan, because we did give an opportunity for
Right.
people to give us their feedback and information on what they're missing and what they'd like to see. This plan will be shared with the city commission, it's being shared with you all. I think one other thing in the education section also talks about educating the board and, talking about different topics, not necessarily this is what the community is saying, maybe that's what you're talking about specifically,
'cause
but
Specifically, I'm
historic
pointing out
preservation
that
topics.
you had 262 survey respondents out of 182,000 residents. That's 0.15% of the population. And those are kind of geared towards people who wanted to respond, not necessarily what the people of the public feel about historic preservation. So you already have people who are interested in it. And secondly, 22 respondents in the second. I mean, you're even getting smaller about
Mhm.
what information you're getting from real people in the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah,
Like
it was a
my
more
under-
detailed survey for sure, the second one, and on top of that, those responses, the Craig group did go out and they did some in-person interviews. They called people and then we sent at a board meeting, we talked about the different goals and objectives. I asked all of you to weigh in on that at that time. There's only so much we can do as far as collecting information of those that are interested and want to share that feedback.
Well, in drafting some of this
Yeah.
stuff, for example, was it only city staff and the consultant that you hired, or was anybody in the public? Board members like this, or people in either in the districts, whether they had a business or were providing a service that were involved in the strategy or plan, or was it city employees?
The same effort that went for the first survey went for the second survey as far as getting the word out and trying to get feedback. Like I said, the board members did have an opportunity to weigh in on it. There were multiple outreach calls. I know one-on-one calls, probably, I would say at least 15 or 20 additional calls, plus the feedback that we received through that survey. So it wasn't just staff writing anything, it was definitely from the feedback that we received. Any other questions on the education section? Okay. And then just an overview of next steps. So we will be sharing this plan with multiple groups, including the city commission, and the civic associations around the city, and some of our preservation stakeholders, and then ultimately request that it be adopted or accepted by the city commission through a resolution.
Will there be follow-up touch points to the public as the plan advances, either to kind of gauge their thought on it or?
Well, so the next thing that
Yeah,
we'll
hey.
be talking about is reporting, and each item that's in the plan, it's not just we're gonna get it done by ourselves. There's a certain level of partnership that's required. So each one is very different, and as we go down the list of what we will be doing at different points in time, we'll have to figure out, okay, who's the most appropriate stakeholder that would be important to engage in this? Is it, maybe it's citywide, and
Sure.
we need to talk to more people about how we're approaching this specific task and problem. But I'll just let Andrea talk. I don't wanna steal her thunder.
Thanks, Tricia. So, good evening, everyone. So, like Tricia said, we're definitely in the process of outlining a tracking system so that we can identify, who our partners are going to be, what steps we need to take towards achieving some of these actions. And so we'll be providing periodic updates at regularly scheduled HPV meetings and on an annual basis through an annual report. So we'll be tracking progress based on the completion of our different action items. And so as we complete the action items, which will outline exactly what steps we need to do for that, obviously we'll have documentation showing how our progress has grown. And then we'll also be tracking our progress by near-term, midterm, long-term, ongoing term lengths as well. And so we're still in process of developing this tracking system, but our goal is to set it up in a way that we're able to easily provide this information, easily identify who we're partnering with, easily identify what actions are in progress, what steps we still need to take, and what we are looking to begin in the future. And that concludes my
Best part of the presentation. Your part, not the end, sorry. Really bad.
So when you're talking
yeah, I
about,
know.
when you're talking about connecting some of these things, are you talking about the different departments like sustainability, public works, parks and recreation, all the different government entities, and then going outside that to the Indian tribes, archaeology groups, the residents, businesses that have things?
Yeah, I mean, everything's gonna be a little bit different as far as the approach, just because each of the items is a different task that we're moving towards. So, like, we have one item that's listed that we will help promote Archaeology Month with the Florida Public Archaeology Network, and they have strong ties to different other groups, so that gives us the ability to give further reach. And
Well, I had asked this kind of before, I think at one of the meetings, but the concept of the charrette, and because H1 and Saybrook Bend are both in the Saybrook Bend district, that a charrette for that might cover some of those topics with all the people in the room, like the sewer, the drainage, the seawalls, the, the transportation mobility with the water trail going through there, kind of to coordinate some of those things, so you're not kind of missing the conversations as each department or group,
Yeah,
approaches their own subject matter, not kind of working together as.
right. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
is there a conversation to do that, to kind of address some of those issues?
Well,
Or could there be? Because like I said,
Yeah.
even a Riverwalk, I mean, that's involved in that whole process too with north and south, but
I think when you've asked about the charrette before, it was specifically focused on Sailboat Bend, and I think the feedback that was provided at that time was it needs to be something that we are given direction on, not just through this. It's something, it's larger. You're asking for a lot of different parts to come together in order to make a master plan.
right,
Or
because
the-
it's addressing a lot of these resilience issues. That's why I'm suggesting it, because if you don't address the seawalls, if you don't address
Yeah.
the sewers and the drainage, you're
Yeah.
gonna have major problems with all of these historic properties that are in H1 and Sailboat Bend. So therefore,
Yeah.
A plan to address some of those deals with most of those properties.
Yeah, I mean, I can say that we will definitely be working on different components that will contribute to that. But as far as a overall master plan and what you're requesting, it's not something that our office has the capacity to do on our own. We would really need direction from the city commission or.
Let's start with getting that grant.
Yeah,
Let's get that first grant
Well,
Yeah.
and see what we can do from there, right?
I mean, I
Because
think
Well,
that's.
that
what
will
is
go-
that grant requesting, something like that, or what
No,
are you
no,
saying?
but the grant is gonna be able, is gonna enable for the initial survey to make determinations as to what the next action items will be. Right, that investigation has to occur first. So then at that point in time, we can then have public conversations about what's most important. This is what we think is, what do you think? What are you seeing as the issues? And that might be a public meeting that, for public comment that we can talk a little bit more about. But I think the first step is, we gotta get the money to be able to do the investigation. If we can't do the investigation, no charrette, no public hearing is gonna matter, because if we can't figure out what the real problems are and somehow rank them internally based on people who know what they're talking about, whatever anybody thinks is really not relevant, right?
Well,
So-
but in here, you're talking about creating and preserving, and you're talking about the downtown area, the downtown master plan, the downtown New River plan, the Riverwalk. None of that talks about the existing historic districts. You're not talking about Stranahan and protecting it, you're not talking about H1 district and protecting it, you're not talking about Saybrook Bend protecting it. You're talking about other things that might be problems, but what about your existing structures and seeing them dilapidate or fall down and you lose those?
Sure.
Rather than going out and exploring all the other properties that you might have as historic, you're gonna lose what you have.
Well, but from my understanding is that what the grant is, the investigation the grant would allow for is to examine those existing already identified historic properties as well as the historic districts, right?
Well,
Yes,
finding
okay.
ways of preserving it and how you're gonna do that resilience,
But
whether it's the
that's-
seawalls or
right,
whether it's.
But that's the next steps. We have to get the money to do the investigation first, and then from there determine what are the steps that have to be taken. Because I'm not disagreeing with you that those are things that we have to figure out, but we gotta go through step one before we can get to step two, that's all I'm saying. So I think we just need to fingers crossed. that we get-
six.
Yeah,
I'm
right,
just saying,
exactly, yeah,
You're looking
exactly.
at all these other things, we're not addressing the real problem, preserving what we've got.
But unfortunately, but unfortunately, you are dealing with a bureaucratic system. And the reality of it is, it's easy to say, in my house, I have a problem with my seawall, I want it fixed, I need to figure out how to get money to do it and fix it. That's not how it works on the citywide level.
Right.
That's the reality of what we're dealing with. So, yes, these are the problems that we believe, or that you believe, and I'm saying you just because you're talking about, not you individually, are what need to be fixed now, but citywide, that might not be the largest issue. We need to find out, we all know that
Yeah.
it is, but, we need to find that out and then figure out where do we focus first. And so while individually, those are often the largest issues and concerns for the citizens in Fort Lauderdale, it's bigger than any one property. It's bigger than any one historic district. And this is a long-term plan. This is not a, holy crap, we have a king tide and a tropical storm / hurricane coming. We are gonna have flooding. We know we're gonna have backups. There might be an issue with the water plant. We need to set up sandbags. This is a 10 to 25 to 50-year game plan here that we need to look at stepwise.
Along those lines, a question for Tricia.
Here comes the new guy. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, I have,
Yeah, no.
this is fascinating to me. So you're at point number 6, I'm at -6. Is there a template that drove this report? Is there any other document that the consultant used to draft this for Fort Lauderdale? And then to how you measure success, that's what the world I come from, and usually you plug in a bunch of data and but as I was looking at what you put up, how do you actually measure the success of this? This can be really, really hard. So
Yeah.
is there a template that was used?
So there is a state standard for doing something like this, a strategic historic preservation plan. And so that is what the consultant used to develop this. And then the state reviewed it as part of the grant, because it's a grant from the state. And so as far as tracking, there isn't really a set standard for that. So that's something we're working on, trying to figure out, what's the best way to do it. It might, we might have to change it a little bit over time and make some adjustments as we learn. But each.
Well, I think necessarily to your point, I'm sorry to cut you off. To your point though, and actually even to your point, I think as you progress from those near to mid to long, your metrics will change, right? Your measurement of what success is. And that's actually something that I just had a conversation with another organization I'm involved in, the creation of a strategic plan for, is your outlook on success changes over time. And that's something I never thought about. It's just like, are we gonna hit our numbers? Are we gonna, accomplish the checklist or not? And it's right, it's not static, and that's exactly the wording they use. They said, look, it's not static. Your levels of success and your marks of success will shift over time as you advance and implement whatever your strategic plan is, right? So I didn't think about it until you said it, but that's a really good point. That's gonna be a tough call as to what determines success.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I mean,
There would be a template for that
Right.
too.
Right.
Other people have done this thing that you all are doing,
right.
and it would be neat to leverage.
Which is why I think that you've hired the consulting plus that has experience and exposure with going from various different cities that kind of guides the city of Fort Lauderdale and how to address some of those metrics and how to design a plan that helps them make those judgment calls. And there are so many variables that are gonna change every year or every 5 years. So you are gonna have, even if you have a 10-year plan, it's gonna change or have to be adjusted because there are variables that will affect it.
Yeah, I mean, so the consultant, we don't have a contract with them anymore because the grant period is over. So the grant has been fulfilled and this is the product of it. But moving forward, there's other communities within the state of Florida that we can certainly reach out to and kind of see how they're doing things, how they're progressing. I know St. Augustine, their plan was developed a couple of years ago, so they probably have some learning lessons that we can talk about and see how they've progressed through theirs.
That'd be great.
There's a possibility, there might be some shifts throughout this document over time, but that would be the purpose of doing an annual report to say, we've identified this as part of this component and this goal, and this might be something we'd have to adjust and make a little bit of a movement towards going another path that we weren't necessarily projecting initially. So
Fluidity is key.
One
Yeah.
other just miscellaneous question. One of y'all brought up the property appraiser and education and awareness and getting 192 responses. Can you put up something in the statements that they send out with the tax bill just to
It's in it. It's already in your,
Oh, there was something in there. Okay, well,
if you have historic property or
no,
contributing
I'm
property.
talking about just the masses. Just to the 190,000 people, did you know about historic preservation in Fort Lauderdale? Did
So
you
the-
know these?
The problem is those go out from the property
County.
appraiser, right, from the county,
Yeah, and this
not the
is city.
city. But there's gotta be a way, we could talk in the future when we talk about some of these educational things, there are different ways that we've been talking over the years in our meetings about pushing out educational information to the masses, really. Whether it be setting up more visible markers, with maybe a QR code on it or something, whether it be, putting links on certain pages that one might go to if they're looking at the property, so that we can try to push out the messaging and get people to understand more about the city's historic preservation relevance and importance beyond just your own individual property. Because the number of responses, I don't even remember if I filled out the survey, and wondering if I got it through the city's email platform. I probably did, so I'm assuming that actually, now that I think about it, I think I did. But,
Well,
yeah,
I think the sad thing is that there's very little interest in Florida, let alone the city of Fort Lauderdale, for historic preservation. And so that's why you've got such a low number of respondents. And that's something, you can educate people about it, but they don't have an interest in it, and it's not gonna change.
The consultant actually said that it was a high number, and she's been doing preservation plans in a lot of other communities. So she said it was actually a really good response rate
really,
for an online survey.
that's great.
Is this the state of Florida? Is this the
She's-
nation? Because again, that's an issue for America versus Europe or someplace else. Yeah, exactly.
She's
There's very
been
little
all
interest,
over the
but-
country. She's based in California, the consultant that is the Craig Group, and so she's worked outside of the state of Florida. It's not just here.
Because the frequency, even if I'm going to Europe, the Europeans, like, sure, they appreciate the history of things, but they are always looking to modernize the interior, modernize as much as they can because they're tired of it. But they still know, as Americans, that's unique to us. We'll swarm there to see it, but here in America, there's not that history that is appreciated.
Not down here, not down here.
Right, and that's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to point out.
Yeah.
It's tough to get the people to say exactly what they want because you're not really reaching out to the people of the city of Fort Lauderdale because they're not responding. It's only people who are interested in it.
Well, I appreciate the presentation
Thank
and the
you.
work on the plan, really, yeah, thank you. It's good to see some of this stuff being put into action and into words. Yeah, it's a lot.
A lot of work.
Strategic planning is tough.
Yeah.
To figure that out and to work with these firms. It's crazy. All right, so, thank you. We look forward to the update on that. Certainly, if there's anything we can do to assist with any of the grant goals or anything else, of course, this board is always more than welcome to chime in and give our opinions.
Well, speaking of which, are there more opportunities for grant writing or funding to do some of this stuff that you're aware of, or can we explore that further?
As we approach each item, we'll certainly look into what the opportunities are. There are mostly the one that works for us the best is through the state. That usually provides us the most opportunity for projects, and we can apply for 2 every year as a city.
Because
So-
I'm
Can the
aware
board
that.
buy a $2 billion lottery ticket? Just in case we
From
hit
my
it, just in case.
understanding,
Yeah,
I want $100 worth.
There you
Wow.
go.
Wow.
It's an investment, it's an investment.
Wow.
I'll give half of it away if I win, and I don't mind saying
Was
it.
that today you bought that
Pardon me?
for tomorrow's drawing?
Love it. Wait, it's tonight?
It's
Or
tonight,
tomorrow?
yeah.
It's tonight.
11 o'clock.
Tonight?
Buy your tickets on the way home. All right. So,
No, Trish, from my understanding, there are several opportunities, as you pointed out with the Dorsey River Bend, with exploring getting funding for the Black community, what historically has been the Black community, and Indian programs. And so there might be 2 federal avenues to look at for getting funding to do that, surveying of those communities or getting funding to help the archaeological site.
you don't happen to be a grant writer looking for a job. Ask it, they take time.
There
No,
was
those are actually
one
really good ideas.
recent one that was for bricks and mortar projects, but again, it's pointed towards the property owners, and we don't have the information yet. Like, part of the process of doing the survey is doing research and development of narratives and historic contexts, and that helps you write a grant and supports that and says, we've vetted this is important, we want to help preserve it.
We're better than them, give it to me.
So it's all a process, it does take a lot of time, but that's the purpose of having this plan so that we can eventually get to where we want to
Well, we are gonna help you get there as much as we can. All right, any other issues for the good of the city that need to be addressed this evening?
I just wanna update you one thing.
Killing me, Trish, I got a 6 o'clock deadline, let's go.
Alright. So we talked about the Matic Historic District not that long ago. In August, we talked about the proposed code amendment to implement an option to designate the
We
Matic
sent that to the
districts.
commission, right?
So the board did support the code amendment. It went to the Planning and Zoning Board last month in October, and they requested that we do a little bit more public outreach. So on Wednesday of this week, we do have a Zoom meeting that's been advertised to the Civic Association presidents, and hopefully they shared it with their membership. We put it on the city's calendar, put it on Nextdoor, I think it was tweeted. So hopefully we have some members of the community join us.
I
and-
appreciate you telling us about that,
Sure.
because how often do we have members of the community come in here and say, nobody told us about this, we never had a chance to be heard? And I think it's good that we know before they happen, so that we
Sure.
can say, oh, no, we all knew it was happening, and maybe some of us were there, so that's good.
Yeah,
Glad
but
to
the
hear
dilemma with that is you're assuming that all these communities are connected to the civic associations or the HOAs. But when you're a renter, you may not be connected with them, and
Well,
so
you-
it's affecting you.
you know,
Or if you are,
You can do as much as you can to get information out with the means that you have, and I think that that's a
but
pretty
that's
broad
my point
reach,
of
you
why
know?
people will come in and
Yeah.
not know, because it's.
Oh, no, they come in and they know, or they don't know because they don't pay attention until the last minute, but I think that's the reality. All right, any other matters for the good of the city?
I got an off-topic question.
Oh, here we go.
Whatever happened with Castro convertibles?
So it was deferred. It's been on the city commission agenda twice already?
Probably 3 times,
Yeah.
but it's delayed for 6
Yeah,
months.
so it was deferred for 6 months. It's next scheduled for April, it's like the April
Hear it now.
18th meeting.
Onto that thing.
Well, has the owner ever shown up to discuss what was going
Yes.
on?
He is now, I'm sure.
It is now,
Did
exactly.
the owner come, or it was just his representation?
The owner came to the first city commission meeting, and he has a legal representative that spoke on his behalf and requested the initial deferral. And then now it's been deferred at least one other time, and now we are looking at April for the city commission meeting.
Why so long?
I'm not entirely sure.
But this-
Just to give them an opportunity, they've requested an opportunity to do additional research and to be able to be prepared for the meeting and the public hearing.
Sharpening their swords.
Oh, yeah.
Was he supportive of it, or was he
No.
kind of fighting?
No, fighting it.
Not, yeah, they've said they're not interested in designating initially. Not sure what they'll come back with ultimately.
Any other matters for discussion?
I have,
He wants to go.
Barbara, I'll buy you a cocktail.
3 minutes.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
There you go. Ms. Lyons moves.
Seconded.
Seconded. Thank you by Mr. Allen. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good meeting.